All right, welcome back and Alive Now. I'm Austin Westfall, a live look at Jerusalem on what is now Saturday morning in the Middle East. We've, of course, been following as President-elect Trump is filling out his cabinet. A lot of implications for the Israel-Hamas war in the Middle East at large, of course. Standing by is Dr. Alon Burstein to break down everything that we've been seeing and some of the reaction out of the Middle East. Alon, as always, it's good to see you here. Just talking about some of what we've seen over the past few days. The last time I talked to you, we didn't really have a clear picture of who some of these high-profile figures would be that are going to be manning posts like the Secretary of State's office, the Secretary of Defense, National Security Advisor. Marco Rubio, of course, has been selected as Trump's Secretary of State. Pete Hegseth, Fox News host, as the Secretary of Defense. Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor. Elise Stefanik will be the United Nations ambassador. Mike Huckabee, the ambassador to Israel. All of those are yet to be officially confirmed, but nonetheless, Alone, those are Trump's picks. Did some of those names stick out to you this past week? And how is the Middle East generally reacting to Trump's picks?
So it's good to see you, Austin. Obviously, everyone's waiting to see, right, what actually is going to happen in terms of are the appointments actually approved and what is going to be their policies. In general, in Israel, there is a lot of encouragement as a result of some of these picks. I mean, Mike Huckabee, right, is someone who has said in the past that he would himself have bought a house in Efrat. That's one of the settlements in the West Bank. He was giving an interview and said that he refuses to even call it the West Bank. He calls it Judea and Samaria, which is what it's called in Israel officially, but is the name that's more termed by the more right-wing elements in Israel, because the West Bank is a name that was given by Jordan and mostly used by the Arab world. So with that, we're seeing in Israel a lot of anticipation that the Trump administration is going to be in favor of what at least the current administration in Israel, the hawkish right-wing elements, would like to see happen. Meanwhile, in the rest of the Middle East, everyone is sort of holding their tongue, waiting to see where things are going to develop. What everyone is hoping to do, I think, is to sort of wipe the slate clean and see which Donald Trump are they dealing with this time. You know, on the one hand, Trump is obviously shown that he is very much in support of Israel in a lot of ways. He has shown that he's going to be much tougher on Iran. We saw him pull out of the Iranian deal and impose sanctions. On the other hand, Trump has also proven to be very unpredictable. We also know that he has a lot of isolationist tendencies within him. He does not want to get the United States involved in more wars and in more conflicts. It was very surprising to a lot of analysts that Trump was the one under his administration who signed the deal with the Taliban in Afghanistan, because the idea was, you know what, we don't need to be involved in this war anymore. So on the one hand, there's a lot of anticipation in the Middle East of seeing the sort of pro-Israel, hard on Iran trajectory. On the other hand, everyone's also aware, but if the administration is convinced that it actually is in the U.S. interests, or that the U.S. can be less involved in taking a different turn, then maybe the table will be turned in a different way. So everyone's waiting to see what's going to happen. One more thing I'll say is it was very interesting to see last week on Wednesday, because it was Wednesday morning in the Middle East when the elections were called, we saw a very interesting, almost comical event of both Israel's prime minister's office and the chair of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas's office, both issuing statements stating our man was one of the first to call Trump to congratulate him. Netanyahu's office, very publicly, we were one of the first to call, we congratulated him, and very shortly after, Mahmoud Abbas's office, we were one of the first, we want to wipe the slate clean, we want to have a good relationship, we were one of the first to congratulate him. So that tells you a little bit about how everyone is sort of realizing, on the one hand, it's clearly, you know, the same president that we saw in the previous administration. On the other hand, everyone also knows there's a possibility that we'll see a change in trajectory, and everyone wants to get in on the ground floor, so to speak.
You talk about Iran. I want to ask about Iran. You likely saw this reporting this week. Elon Musk reportedly met with Iran's ambassador to the United Nations on Monday, with the two discussing how to diffuse tensions between Iran and the United States, according to two Iranian officials who spoke with the New York Times. One of the Iranian officials said that the Tesla executive requested the meeting and that the ambassador picked the site, which ended up being New York City. Alone, did you find it interesting that Musk was the guy who did this? Have we heard of him dipping his toe into Middle Eastern affairs before?
Musk is involved, or at least through his companies, is involved in a lot of conflicts in the world. We saw him when Russia invaded Ukraine. We saw Musk be very involved in setting up Starlink and making sure that Ukraine still has internet connections. And this was actually pretty instrumental in the way Ukraine managed to fight off Russia at the beginning of the invasion. Musk also tried to make different suggestions for setting up internet in the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip has been cut off from electricity since October 8th of 2023. Musk suggested installing satellite connections, at least in hospitals. It never went through. Israel objected. How they're gonna make sure that Hamas doesn't get it, et cetera, et cetera. But the fact that Musk sort of quote unquote likes to be involved and thinks he can contribute to resolving conflicts, that's not new. The fact that Trump chose Musk for this task specifically, I think, also tells us a few things. One, Trump is aware of the diplomatic array, right? The United States does not have official talks with Iran. Obviously, there's, talks through intermediaries and sometimes secretaries of state talk to each other, but there's no ambassador of the United States to Iran and vice versa. So sending someone who, even as the administration is being built, is not going to be the Secretary of State, is not going to be the official person who can say, well, you send the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense to meet with Iran. It's someone who's going to head up an agency that's unclear what exactly is going to be its prerogative at this point. That shows that, first of all, there's an understanding. We want to make sure the administration is not implicated in maybe being the one to go talk to Iran. Let's have someone who is maybe outside or a little bit outside of the administration. In addition to that, Iran is in dire economic situation. The president of Iran is a new president. He is trying desperately to get the economy back up and running. Iran is suffocating under a lot of sanctions. Inflation there is sky high. Iran is involved in funding a lot of proxy organizations across the Middle East and spending a lot of money there. It's trying to develop more economic ties with Russia, but I don't think that it's a coincidence that Trump, who always has a vision of let's get people to understand that there's a good economic deal here, would have coincidentally sent the richest man in the world be the one to go talk to Iran and say, maybe we can start over, or maybe we can do something that will be beneficial to you also from an economic standpoint. I think that that's the message that's being sent with specifically sending Musk to this negotiation.
The Jerusalem Post says the Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorist group released another video on Friday of Russian-Israeli hostage Alexander Trufanov, who has remained in captivity since the October 7th attack. You and I talked about this offline, Alon. The Post says that this comes 2 days after a previous video of Trufanov was released. It is also the fourth such video of him. Alon, why might they be releasing hostage videos as of late?
So there's a couple of things to consider with regards to the releasing of these videos. These are the first videos that are being released of live hostages since probably May of this year. There were videos that were released in September, but they were of the hostages that were executed. After they were executed, Hamas released videos of them that had been taken previously. Trupanov seemingly is still alive. In both of his videos that were released now, he mentions things that have happened in the last several weeks. He mentions the IDF invasion of Lebanon. He also, in his second video that was released today, discusses applying pressure and requesting from Israel's minister Aryeh Deri to apply pressure on Netanyahu to reach a deal. But that's interesting because Deri is now one of the only figures in Israel's cabinet that would have been pressuring a deal. But previously, it would have been the defense minister Yoav Gallant also. So that also indicates that may have been shot only in the last week or two. Why now? Why is the Palestinian Islamic Jihad doing this now? There's a lot of speculation about that. Chiefly, most people are suggesting that the negotiations are completely stalled. Right? We saw that there was a summit that was called several weeks ago. It happened. It went nowhere. And that the organizations are, first of all, trying to again lift the flag of the hostages, trying to remind the world, maybe even remind the Biden administration in the last 2 months, there's still hostages and you can still have this be your legacy, force Israel to have a ceasefire and have a hostage deal, bring the hostages home. That could be sort of the Biden legacy, if you will. So that's one option. Another option that they're releasing videos specifically of Trupanov. Trupanov is one of 2 hostages that has Russian citizenship. That is important. Russia has in the past played a role in trying to negotiate between the organizations and Israel. During the hostage deal that occurred by now almost exactly a year ago, there was one Russian citizen that was released without any payoff, so to speak, without Palestinian prisoners being released, just as a gesture of Hamas to Russia. So it could be that this is also an attempt to sort of drag Russia into the negotiations. One more thing that I'll speculate on why the organizations are releasing these videos right now, in addition to obviously Trump being elected and the fact that, attention is shifting towards Lebanon and all these things, Qatar withdrew from the negotiations over a week ago. When this happened in April, Israel and the United States scrambled. They scrambled. They asked Qatar to not withdraw. They said, no, let's come back to the table. And it was no surprise and no coincidence that then in May, we had Israel and the United States agreeing to some form of deal. This time, Qatar withdrew from the negotiations. Israel said, good. Israel said, that's great. Qatar, as is not a party that we trust. The United States is not asked to come back. And I think that kind of shocked the Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And this may be a way to, again, just resurface the hostage situation, show both Biden and Trump and Israel the hostages are still alive and pressure can still be mounted on you. There's no threat to execute them or anything like that, but obviously that's implied in releasing these hostage videos. And the attempt is just to sort of shift the focus back to the Gaza Strip, right? Just as an illustration, you and I speak once, twice a week. The Gaza Strip isn't coming up that much. There's ongoing fighting there. There's ongoing fighting in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, in Han Yunis, in Rafah in the south. But all eyes right now are on Iran. All eyes right now are on Lebanon. All eyes are on the negotiations going on for diplomatic resolution in Lebanon. All eyes are on Trump and his policies in the Middle East. Palestinian Islamic Jihad is likely trying to signal to Russia, the United States, to Qatar, to anyone, remember Gaza, remember that we still want to ceasefire and we still have hostages as a way to try to force you into that ceasefire.
And Alon Burstein uploads his own videos to his own YouTube channel. He updates them regularly throughout the week. He covers everything about the conflict. Alon, we appreciate you. Take care.
Thank you. Have a good night.